Pablo Escobar. Yeah. So today we are going to be talking about one of the biggest drug lords to ever live. If you ask me, I'm going to say he's one of the smartest, Pablo Escobar. Now, who is Pablo Escobar? When people hear the name Pablo Escobar, what comes to their mind is power, strategy, corruption, drug trafficking, and all that. But to me, he's a master strategist, all right? He's very smart. He's a smart guy. Yeah, he's a criminal, but he's a smart criminal, if you know what I'm talking about, all right? So as you all know, I do my findings and my investigations on these people, these top figures. I jot them down and I bring it out to the public. Now, without wasting much time, let's dive into what we have today, which is Pablo Escobar. Now, in the 1980s, all right, in the early 1980s and in the early 1990s, yeah, Escobar was the most wanted man in Colombia. All right, he was so wanted that the Colombia government had to work with the U.S. government in order to bring this man down. All right, now, but why was Pablo Escobar a major target for the federal authorities? What was his crime? Now, let's look at his crime. All right, now, number one, he ran a cartel business, and the name of this cartel is called the Medellín Cartel, a very dangerous gang that he uses to inflict pain on people, to move his drug, and to commit all sorts of illegal crimes. All right. Now, Pablo Escobar's cartel supplied an estimated 80% of the cocaine entering the United States. Now, 80%, that's a very huge number. 80% of the cocaine entering the United States was being supplied by Pablo Escobar. Man, this guy was rich, all right? This guy was big. He had so many luxury properties. This guy was big. He had money, he had fame, and he had the connection, all right? Number two, billions of dollars flow through this network every single year. That's why I say he was very, very rich. Pablo Escobar was a very rich man because he was rooted in this drug business. And as we all know, moving of cocaine is illegal in most of the countries all over the world, all right? But this man was moving 80% of it in the United States, all right? And again, he became one of the richest men in the world through illegal drug sales. By the illegal movement of these cocaines, Pablo Escobar became one of the most richest and biggest man. To me, that name all over the world, any continent you go to, once you make mention of the name Pablo Escobar, you already know who he is, all right? Because, man, this guy was big, all right? But now, moving on, when the police, or let's say the federal authorities, started looking for him. Now, this is what Pablo Escobar did. Pablo Escobar imprisoned himself in his mansion. The name of the mansion is La Cathedral. He imprisoned himself in this mansion. All right. He stopped coming out, and nobody knew where he was at the moment. All right. Nobody knew where Pablo Escobar was because he isolated himself from the world, knowing fully well that they are searching for him. There's a bounty on his head. All right. So in order to avoid the federal authorities from getting a hold on him, he isolated himself from the world. All right. But what makes me call him a very smart man? Now, being isolated, he knew that he needed to communicate with the outside world, because even as Pablo Escobar isolated himself, he had already been declared wanted at the moment. He was still running his business. He was still running the illegal drug trafficking, all right? But while running this, he knew that he needed to communicate with the outside world. Now, how was he going to do that? Because at the time, he knew also that the federal authorities were listening to his every move. They were listening his calls. His line has been wired. His phones were wired. He knew that if he used any type of technology, they are going to get him. If he tried coming out, they are going to get him. Now, how could he communicate with the outside world? Now, Pablo Escobar now had to think and think. And then he remembered that during the Third World War, the military had a way of communicating with each other without the enemy knowing. And what is this simple way? The use of pigeons. Alright? Now, Pablo Escobar introduced this method. He was communicating with his cartel members that are stationed all over the country with pigeons. Now, I know a lot of you will be like, pigeons. Yeah. In the Third World War, pigeons were used to transfer information from one destination to another. Now, picture this. The police are listening in on calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without getting anything. Without knowing that information are passing through their head every single day. The pigeons are flying over their head, taking Pablo's information to where he wants it to go. Now, how does this pigeon work? Now, this is how the pigeon work. The pigeon is being read at a particular place. All right, is read at let's use location A and location B as an example. Now, the pigeon is given birth to and reared at location A. All right. Now, it's being transported from location A to location B. Now, when it's transported to location B by either car or anybody, but it has to be transported to location B. When you now give it the information, the pigeon will somehow navigate and find its way back to location A. Now, that's one thing with pigeons. If you take them from a particular, if they're from their place of rest to anywhere, they somehow find a way to come back to their place of rest, no matter how far you took them. And Pablo Escobar knew this strategy. Now, he started using pigeons to transfer information from his place to his cartels. Now, how do they do this? They transport these pigeons to the La Cathedral where Pablo Escobar imprisoned himself. Now, Pablo Escobar writes his information, ties it to the pigeon, and the pigeon goes back to its resting place, which is where the cartels are, because the cartels do rear the pigeons because of this purpose. All right. So Pablo Escobar was now using pigeons to communicate with his cartels that were stationed around the country without under the police noses. They were trying to know, how is this man, despite going on the ground, this man is still running his business. How is he doing this? But Pablo was way smart. Dude was very smart. That's why I call him the smartest criminal to ever live. Dude was way smart. But then, you see, one thing about federal authorities is, once they mean something, they do get it. They have this spirit of never giving up. All right, and you see, in the midst of every 12, there's always a Judas. To me, I figured out that it must have been someone from inside Pablo Escobar's circle that leaked this information to the federal authorities, telling them that, whoa, you guys are wasting your time, man. If you're waiting for him to make a call, he's not gonna do that. For you to track his location, he's not gonna do that, because he's using pigeons to transfer his information. So when the federal authorities, both the Colombian government and the US government, noticed this, that, whoa, we are wasting our time, really, what did they do? They hit the cathedral where Pablo Escobar had imprisoned himself. Now, they used a high level of technology to get and to track down Pablo Escobar. But before then, man has run with so many businesses, man has enriched himself, man was into the drug trafficking business, and man had already cashed out real big. But the most important thing was that Pablo Escobar was caught and was killed. Yeah, Pablo Escobar was killed. And that brings us to the end of this documentary. All right. Now, I know a lot of you might have heard some stories about Pablo Escobar, some gossips, some leaks, some rumors. Put it down in the comment section down below. What have you heard about Pablo Escobar before? And if you like this type of content, I want you to hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I'll be bringing you more and more of these documentaries and more of your celebrity highlights. I remain your humble host, Divine.